Ladies and gentlemen, it is my extreme pleasure to invite Stephen Fincham up to the dais, please. Please give him a warm round of applause. Now, Stephen is from Prison Chaplaincy. I can tell you that he's married, he has a daughter. I can also tell you another little snippet that he proffered up to me in my interrogation. He has just become naturalised, so now he's an Aussie. So, there you go. So, mate, you've won him over already.
Thanks, Colin.
Go for it.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for talking to me as well. It's nice when you come somewhere new and you're not part of the group. When people talk to you, it's quite a nice thing. So that's been really nice for welcoming. So I am from the State Chaplaincy Board for Corrections. I'm the chair. I'm also State Manager for Uniting Care Prison Ministry as well. So I've been in this role for nearly 6 years, and dealing with corrections, it's always a challenge. Keeps us honest. Trying to do the right thing. I've been asked to at the beginning just share a couple of things around some differences. So in Queensland, prison chaplaincy is all voluntary. Some of the organisations do pay their chaplains, Salvation Army being the main group who pay. The rest of the chaplains are voluntary. And we have a contract with Queensland Corrective Services that funds the administration of that, but there's no paid chaplain. So in other states, I know New South Wales have like an $8 million budget for chaplaincy, which is amazing. We have less than $1 million. So it's quite a different way of doing things. So all chaplaincy for Christians goes through the State Chaplaincy Board for Corrections, and any programs that are run, nothing to do with chaplaincy. We're purely there to provide pastoral care to all prisoners, irrespective of who they are, what they've done, where they've been, etc. So in terms of programs, so Uniting Care, we run quite a few different things. Prison Fellowship run quite a few different things, but they're all separate to our chaplaincy space. So I'll just put that out there at the beginning. So there's a lot of differences out there throughout the states, and I guess that's the beauty of living in a country like ours, where we have our independence in those states to run things as we wish. So whilst a number of you have, well, I've said this, there's a number of you in the room who will have been prison chaplains and part of Kairos. I don't know if that's true across the other states, but in my team in Uniting Care, I can count on 6 people who've been on team with Kairos in different prisons to where they're prison chaplains. I thought I might see a few here tonight, but there's nobody that I know apart from Pat there as a guest, and Brian for inviting me. But we don't have a formal relationship with Kairos in terms of how we operate, but our chaplains will go before and kind of sow the seed for people. This might be something you might consider, or journey with them after they've been on a Kairos program, and kind of journey with them in that aftermath of that. So that's the kind of relationship that we would have. It's an informal space. There's no formality to that, but it's something that we see as a real value, and our chaplains really find that as a great opportunity to kind of, I guess, cross-pollinate with the rest of the Christian family. So like you, the State Chaplaincy Board, we're passionate about what we do, and I thought I'd just share a little bit about what that is. So we are here, we exist to deliver faith-based pastoral care and support to all prisoners in all of Queensland's adult correctional centres, irrespective of their condition, religious background, faith, belief, social position, strengths, weaknesses, ethnicities, or crimes. So we don't go into the youth detention centres. In Brisbane, that's done by Scripture Union, and in North Queensland, there's another arrangement made up there, but we don't have any jurisdiction in that space. So the SCB is made up of 7 representatives, and from those 7 representatives, service providers, each service provider recruits and trains and coordinates their own chaplains who identify specifically with that group. However, in the day-to-day running of the prison, on the prison floor, the chaplains work as one harmonious body, an ecumenical group, without differentiation between who they are or where they're from. They're Christian chaplains to serve all people. So the majority of our chaplains are volunteers, like I said, and the reason I've got this up here is we are there as professional visitors. We're seen, even as a voluntary capacity, they're seen as professional visitors by Queensland Corrections under the Corrective Services Act in 2006. So I just thought I'd put that there. That's why we exist, is because of this act. The corrections need to provide, they're mandated to provide pastoral care or spiritual support to people. So you can read that if you like. It's a little bit interesting or a bit boring, depends on who you are. So that's that. So for well over 3 decades, I think it's closer to 40-something years, informally, there's been this partnership between 7 service providers, an interface between the churches and other church organisations and Queensland Corrective Services. So as you can see there, the Anglican Church, Centre Care, which is part of the Catholic Church, First People's Prison Chaplaincy, which is managed by Uniting Care, Inside Out Prison Chaplaincy or Corinity, which is part of the Baptist Church, Prison Fellowship Queensland, which is an international non-denominational organisation, the Salvation Army, and Uniting Care, which is part of the Uniting Church. So we've been working together for well over 3 decades in this relationship, and we've had a formalised contract for 8 years with Queensland Corrections to provide pastoral care. And that pastoral care is something that's changed time and time again over the years, from being quite evangelical, we're there to be Christian, to now where we are there to provide pastoral care and not an evangelical space at all. So the SCB is managed in compliance with the contract by Queensland Corrective Services to provide non-denominational pastoral care to all of Queensland Corrective Services. So there's 14 prisons throughout the state, from Lotus Glen in the north down to Pelham Creek and Numinbah in the south. They're farm prisons in the hinterland, really beautiful. If you want a holiday, it's a nice place to go and have a walk. But they're for people who've done some time in high security, but then they go there for work, so they might work all day and then come back at lunchtime, and they're a different kind of place. And then everywhere in between, from Townsville Men's and Women's, Capricornia in Rockhampton, Maryborough, Woodford, and then we've got Wacol Precinct, which has Brisbane Women's, Brisbane Correctional Centre, Arthur Gorrie, Walston and Barallan just a bit further north. And then there's one other little prison called Helena Jones, and I've forgotten Woodford as well, which is probably the biggest and most violent prison. And Helena Jones is a really little small 25-bed prison with mums and babies. The mums go out to work. You wouldn't know it's there. It's on Sandgate Road in Brisbane, if you Albion. So it's a really, there's everything from high security to farms to really low security prison. So we have chaplains who go in there every day of the week. So the SCB contract is undertaken to manage a daily chaplaincy roster for all prisons throughout the state, and to provide a Sunday service every Sunday. So the chaplains are on a roster to provide that. The Sunday service is the opportunity that chaplains get to be a witness, to share their faith. So that's a time to do a non-denominational service. Obviously there'll be elements of each person's faith tradition. They're not meant to be completely alien to that, and that's why we have the service providers, so that each prisoner can have an aspect of that, of their tradition that they belong to. So to ensure that our chaplains are trained and equipped to do their duties, the State Chaplaincy Board facilitates an annual in-service training a little bit like this, where we gather all of our chaplains from across the state for that training. And to keep our chaplains on track between the training, the State Chaplaincy Board provides an operational policy handbook reminding our people of the do's and don'ts. And of course that happens to be very important today. There's always somebody watching, there's always somebody listening, and there's always somebody doing the wrong thing. So it keeps us busy in the State Chaplaincy Board. And it's not always things on purpose. Oftentimes it's people just doing the wrong thing because they've always done that, or thinking they're helping somebody, or they become too close to somebody and just become a little bit waylaid by the right thing to do. So together with the service providers that I've mentioned, the State Chaplaincy Board manages over it's around 160 chaplains at the moment. They're all volunteers, as I said, and they're trained, equipped and fully committed to rehabilitation of prisoners and provide support to them in their times of need, giving guidance in their moments of the now. I don't know what your experience is with prisoners, but oftentimes we experience the now is the most important time, and they become very focused on that moment. They can't often see the bigger picture. And oftentimes chaplains find that opportunity just to journey with someone over months and years to help them see the broader picture, the bigger aspects of life. It's not all about the now. As they go back into community, one of our aims is to help them flip the script. This is something from one of our former members of the board, Miles Waldron, his name was. He used to say, flip the script a lot. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he would say that his experience was that when someone changes the way that they see themselves or flip the script from bad to good, then once they flip that script, they can really see themselves assisting in changing their life. And because they can change their life, they can change others. And by changing others, they can change the world. That's the way that they would see that. So change the narrative of their own life. Maybe that one thing that is life-giving, helping them to make a positive lifestyle choice rather than negative ones that might have led them to their incarceration and recidivism. So overall, prison chaplains provide a significant contribution to the structural fabric of the correctional environment. One of the general managers said to us that he believes that chaplains offer a dynamic security in an often heightened environment. So the way that he described that was that if he was to go into a unit and to see a chaplain there, he knows that the tempers, the raging aggression is going to be dampened by just the very presence of a chaplain, the peace that chaplain brings into that space. So our chaplains foster emotional well-being amongst prisoners and staff and model positive choices whilst engaging with prisoners in a meaningful dialogue, all done on a daily basis, nearly every day of the year, through engagement of this pastoral relationship. So there's a little look at what a chaplain's day in the life of a chaplain looks like. It's not like this in every centre, because every centre is different, but it gives you a little brief overview. Most chaplains will arrive at the prison between 7 and 8. They'll get in before muster, and then they'll go about their duties. They'll go into the units. They're the only people other than officers who have free reign of the prison. So they can go into any unit at any time with the say-so of the officer. So they have unrivaled access, which is a real privilege. And I think the prisoners who don't value chaplains find it a bit of a confrontation at first, but then they often realise that actually it's not so bad having them in there, and they offer that sense of peace that I've already spoken about. So I just thought I'd show you that brief overview, and oftentimes people will leave around that 4 o'clock mark. So we have a minimum time where our chaplains stay in there for at least 4 hours of the day. Depends on musters or training. That's sometimes a bit shorter, but normally 4 hours would be the minimum all the way through to a full day. So pastoral care is sometimes called spiritual care. Is described as a ministry of support to any person in their pain, loss and anxiety, and in their triumphs, joys and victories. So we're commiserating and we're celebrating. We're in that space with them all the time. So the theory and philosophy of pastoral care is not to depend on any set of beliefs or traditions, and people providing pastoral care are trained to relate gently and skillfully with the inner world of the individuals of whom they're walking with, and to look at the elements that make up that person's self and their inner resources, resilience and capacity to cope. And I think it's that journey, that ministry of presence that we really see as of value in the prison space, with so much high needs, that ministry of presence where people are just there journeying on the walk with them. It seems to find a way of coping. So people who provide pastoral care are not counsellors or therapists. They operate under a positive motivation that has no strings attached. I shared a little story earlier with somebody, I can't remember who that was, but there was one of my Indigenous chaplains. She's a tiny lady, probably about this tall, and she was in there talking to one of the Indigenous guys, and 2 other fellas started punching on, and she said, something to the lines of, "What are you doing? Stop that nonsense." And they stopped immediately. One of them laughed at her and said, "Oh, you're only here because you're getting paid." And she said, "No, I'm not." And she said, "What do you mean?" "Well, I'm here as a volunteer." So the guy who questioned her walked off. The other guy stopped with tears in his eyes. "Why are you here for me?" And she just shared that she wanted to share the love of God. And the guy started crying. No one cares for us. Like, who comes here for free to be with me? And I guess it's the same with you guys as volunteers, turning up every time to do that program, to share the love of God. And this guy journeyed with the auntie for a good 3 or 4 months before he was put into another centre. And then he continued that relationship with another chaplain in that new centre. So it's that presence, that being real, that turning up every week in, week out, journeying with people. Once they've done a course like Kairos or an art program that Uniting Care run, they journey with that person afterwards and, "Oh, how did you go? What did you learn? What can you teach me? How do you engage in that relationship?" So the stuff that you're doing and that Vern was sharing earlier, that being present together, just listening, the chaplains do that same relationship afterwards and before, and they continue journeying with that person. So in providing pastoral care, prison chaplains are other-centred, tolerant, accepting, non-prejudiced and non-judgmental. There's been quite a lot of chaplains who started maybe 30 years ago. We had one guy who's had to really work at what that means, because the way that he was this is what I believe, this is what I've always believed, this is what the Bible says to me. And to go on that journey to actually saying, well, this is my belief, and holding it quite loosely and saying, well, that's true, and journeying with that space. When we hold our beliefs so tightly, they become a fist. And I was in the Navy, and one of my bosses told me that a fist is a dangerous weapon. If you have open hands or loose hands, you can't do much damage with that. If we hold our faith loosely, but still hold it true, then we can be much more used than we can be with a fist that's closed. We can have open hands, that we're more gentle, that we can share the love of Christ. So that's what we talk about with this pastoral care, to provide support to all prisoners and be respectful of that person's theological views or lack thereof. It's not speaking to proselytise others, but to journey with them in the column elements of their faith traditions and seek to facilitate a person's support in the manner consistent with their faith journey. So the service that is contracted with the SCB, we receive funding from QCS to do that. I said it's just under $1 million to provide over 160 to 180 chaplains when we're going well. It's no mean feat to do it on such an amount of money. Our chaplains get paid an out-of-pocket expense. It's a reimbursement for their travel, and that's all they get from that space. So the funding enables us to be a professional body and goes towards administration, professional development and volunteer costs, with the majority of the funds on the administration and reimbursement of chaplains. So our chaplains are a diverse bunch from many different backgrounds, traditions, and many with criminal past as well, which oftentimes we see as a really valuable way of engaging with prisoners. When they see somebody who's changed their life, it really has a different dynamic. So they come to the correctional centres, bringing with them many years of experience and willingness to share that with others. And each of our chaplains give nearly 500 hours of their time every year in delivering pastoral care to the correctional centres, as well as training and self-care activities. So I think it's a huge commitment. 500 hours, it's quite a big ask, really. So that's pretty much what I wanted to share, and I thought I might just open up for questions if people wanted to ask me anything that was burning for you, or I'll take those questions. Is there?
That's fine. I'm Jan. I'm an ex-juvie chaplain. I'm just wondering how it works with 160, 180 chaplains in 14 prisons. And so is each chaplain just there in the prison one day a week? Or,
yeah, so we have
then how does it happen that, a guy or girl that shares something on Monday and then doesn't see that chaplain again till the following Monday, say? I'm just trying to get my head around it because I was part-time / full-time in my centre.
Yeah. So the way that it works is a team. So each centre has a chaplaincy team that works together as a homogenous group. So if somebody, of course, one day they might see someone and never want to speak to another chaplain, and they'll wait until that chaplain comes back in. But what we try and foster is this relationship that we're a team of chaplains, and tomorrow there's an equally good chaplain coming in who you can journey with. And so they share relationship with those prisoners. So we have this mantra that we're friendly but not friends. So we're in ministry with these people to journey with them in that space. And so if somebody comes with an issue on Monday and my chaplain's there, they'll write a note in the diary for the next day to say, can you visit this person in this unit tomorrow? These are the issues that you might want to connect with. And they'll go in and journey with that person. If it's a really delicate matter, then there's other ways that we might look at that. But anything that's to do with self-care, self-harming or dangerous to themselves or others, then straight away that's reported, and the prisoner's told that that's going to be reported. And but we find that that relationship really does work, and that value that the prisoners see as a group of people who are there together. And if they do want to save that information for the next time, then they'll wait a week. But generally, there's a real good relationship between the chaplains and a good cohesion. And every month, the chaplaincy teams in each prison, they meet together to discuss issues pertaining to their correctional centre as well. So there's a fair few methods that we use to make it work.
I'm from New South Wales, so forgive my ignorance. I'm just wondering if Kairos, for instance, wants to run a program in a prison. I mean, we go through the chaplain, and if you have a different one every day of the week,
Yep.
Is there a hierarchy? Is there a senior person in each jail so that the invitation can be passed through them, or how does that work, please?
So, yeah, and that's, so earlier on I mentioned around the relationship that chaplains have with, and we've had other chaplains on team. So if Kairos was to be run in one centre, then the chaplaincy team would be aware of that within the centre in order to pass information to people as they, to know about the programme. But for the programme to be approved, that goes through centre management, through the management of offender development. So they would focus in that space. So managers of offender development look at anything from psychs through to other educational courses and everything in between. So chaplaincy are contractually not allowed to run anything at all. So for example, Uniting Care, we run a Bible study in one prison, but it can't be our prison chaplains who run that. So chaplains are purely there to provide the pastoral care. And so when it comes to programme, chaplains can disseminate the information, they can share on the journey in that space, but it's purely the pastoral support rather than the facilitation of any courses.
How do you handle non-Christian faiths?
So in terms of how a chaplain would handle an inmate who comes to them, so in terms of pastoral care, they'll sit and journey with that person and talk to them as they would anybody. If that person asks for their religious text, then we'll find information for that person and they'll be able to access their religious text through their management in the centre. What we've found is if a chaplain becomes an obstacle to somebody who isn't of the same faith, then that person becomes disenfranchised and they decide to take umbrage with that person and that faith tradition. When a chaplain is open, like I was sharing earlier with the fist analogy, then that person might come back and ask questions and have a diverse conversation around that. And I think our experience has been, I had my third time in a prison. I was at Walston, which is a protection prison, sex offenders in one area, and I was walking around with the chaplains, and there was a Islamic inmate, and he just kept walking past, shouting obscenities at us and telling us how awful we were. And I just said, "Salam alaikum," and stood next to him, and his mouth dropped. And he said, "How do you know that?" And I said, "Oh, it's peace be with you. We have the same understanding that we're to be peaceful together." And we sat and we dialogued for a good 10 or 15 minutes while the other chaplain was there talking to the people he knew. And we sat and talked, and that guy's temper went from being, you people don't understand me, you won't give me a Bible, you won't, a Quran, you won't engage with me, always, I can't see an Islamic chaplain, to, oh, you're actually here for me, you're here to listen to me. And so through dialogue and open relationship, that's the only way that we engage.
You mentioned chaplains that do well in that role. How do you discern who has those giftings, and what do you do when you find they don't?
Oh, well, that's a really good question. And that depends on the service provider. So the State Chaplaincy Board as an overarching body doesn't do any hiring or firing of chaplains. It's down to the individual service provider. So I have a process where I meet with them and I'll do some performance management. For example, I had a chaplain who I assumed was going to the prison all the time, regularly and for long enough periods of time. It turned out he wasn't. I got the gate list from the prison to see when he was going in, also the time logs, turned up when he was meant to be there, and saw him coming out after 10 minutes of being there. So we put in a performance management thing for him. So in Uniting Care, we work professionally in that space, so we look at a performance management as we would for an employee, and it's more about the relationship. So what's the problem with you? What's changed? So if it's somebody who's gone from being a capable chaplain to someone who's not so capable, there's something's happened in the interim. So it's about that pastoral care. So in my space, my job's about caring for that person. So I'm pastor to the chaplains, I guess, chaplain to the chaplains, and engage them in that space first. And then we go about either re-engaging them, giving them time for supervision, professional supervision. It's a heightened environment. Sometimes you've got aggression every day. You've got trauma that might be passed on vicariously to you through the relationship with others. So we offer that pastoral care, but we also offer professional supervision to help them in that space. And sometimes there's an opportunity for somebody to go another way. They might not want to. We might have to remove them. And there are other times where corrections tell us that people have to go, and then we have to remove them for breaching contract.
Do you have any non-Christian chaplains?
No, so we operate as a Christian chaplaincy group. Yeah.
So there wouldn't be a Muslim chaplain or anything like
Not
that?
Not within the State Chaplaincy Board for Corrections, but Queensland Corrections in 2 prisons do have Islamic chaplains who go to offer Friday prayers and some pastoral support, but it's not in the same level that we have. And in the coming months, they are looking to have a more broader multi-faith advisory council. I think that's everyone. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, how about